What is going on, Dodger fans? Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Incline Dodgers podcast presented by Tick Pick and Fansided. We are one day away now from the MLB Trade Deadline, and I know a lot of Dodger fans are maybe frustrated out there because the Los Angeles Dodgers have yet to make a move. But we still got tomorrow, and this team is well notoriously known for pulling off last-second trade deadline moves. We're joined for the third year in a row talking MLB trade deadline. And I want to say every year that Michael Duarte has been on here, who is the NBCLA writer, reporter, and insider for the Dodgers, back to the point, every time Michael's on here, I feel like you drop a tidbit that actually comes true. So how you been doing, Michael?
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for having me. Yeah, this feels like an annual podcast guest that we're doing here, and I love it at this time of year because it's one of my busiest times of year, especially when I'm reaching out to everyone and trying to get the latest. And obviously, I don't want to say busy time for fans, but kind of nerve-wracking, frustrating, exciting time for fans as they tend to get a little overreactionary and passionate at this time of year, and I enjoy it as well. My DMs are flooded at the moment.
That's awesome. Well, obviously, we had a little bit of a scare today. Shohei Ohtani exited his start early in the early parts of the fourth inning. Fortunately, it sounds like it was just a cramp injury. I know you've been covering the Dodgers for this series as well, of course, the entirety of the year. Any insight into kind of just a rough series it seemed like for Shohei?
Yeah, I tweeted, we cannot get Shohei out of Cincinnati fast enough. We were probably an Andy Pages foul ball catch away from maybe sweeping the series. So as a team, it was great to be in Cincinnati. But the heat, the humidity, I don't know if you've ever been, not just Cincinnati, Kevin, but Ohio in general, the Midwest in general. I used to go to games in St. Louis at the old Busch Stadium this time of year, and oh my gosh, it'd be like mid-90s at that stadium. No relief, no air conditioning, no fans. So that humidity in the Midwest this time of year, especially Ohio, Cincinnati, is tough. And it seems like Shohei was showing the effects of it, not just today during his start when he came out, but throughout this series. 0 for 10, 5 strikeouts, a cramp in his right hip to start this game in the first inning, something he had to battle through. He had to change his delivery to get through. But thankfully, it was just that cramp, and it is a kind of a box he can check as far as getting into that fourth inning. Him going deeper to games is something that's happening right now for him. It's a step as far as growth and progress is concerned, not the result we want, but thank God it was nothing serious, nothing related to his arm or something that would have him out for an extended period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. July has been kind of a pedestrian month for the Dodgers, picking up the slack a little bit better, but they're still a 500 team over their last 10 games. They've now seen their lead in the NL West dwindle to just 3 games over the San Diego Padres, and we haven't heard much action from the Padres yet, but I'm under the impression they're going to make some aggressive moves tomorrow. It's just a matter of who. And I think the Dodgers might have to counter, and we'll see who they end up going for. I know we're going to talk about that in a minute, but I just want to keep in mind that the NL West is no longer a runaway train for the Dodgers. The Padres are right there in this mix.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, thanks to the Mets with a 5-run collapse on Monday of this game, could have put a little bit more cushion between us and the Padres. Had a lot of fans upset that the Mets, blew that lead and ultimately get swept by the Padres, who I feel like lost 2 of 3 to the Marlins not too long ago. So it's a very strange period, not just for the Padres, but the Dodgers, what we see going on. It's the summer doldrums, we say, the dog days of summer. We talk about how the Dodgers are a middling team here in July. I feel like they were a middling team last July. Now, something I want to point out to you, Kevin, going back to last year, and I'm sure we'll get into that because we were talking at this time last year on your podcast as well, but, the Dodgers had a pretty good sized lead in the NL West last year. They had a little bit of a shaky July, as we said. They let the Padres creep back into the race where it got within, a handful of games right around where we are now. And I think last season, and obviously we know how that season ended in a championship and a parade down Vin Scully Avenue for the Dodgers. It's having to play games in August and September that mattered with a team in your rearview mirror, I think helped them compared to years prior where maybe they had a double-digit lead in the division and they were kind of in cruise control and maybe not feeling that playoff atmosphere or that sense of urgency that these games really matter. And they kind of got to focus and pick up the slack. And so I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that San Diego's 3 games back at this point, especially with the hitters struggling, especially with the lineup struggling, especially with, kind of turning the tires in July, as you just mentioned. I think knowing that this team is breathing down your neck, that you don't have as much margin for error or cushion as you'd like, should lock this team in, should get them focused. And, I was saying on the Dodgers Nation post-game show back at the latest homestand after the game, because you had Dodgers fans through Dodgers Nation panicking and wanting them to go all in and make these big trades for some of these all-star closers that were out there and potentially available on the market. Duran is one guy that moved today to the Phillies. And I was kind of telling him, I don't necessarily – that's one way to do it is to make a big trade, but this team needed a kick in the ass. Excuse my language, Kevin. They needed that kickstart to kind of jolt them awake. And you can do that with a team that's kind of going through the motions here and seems like everyone simultaneously struggling at the plate. You can do that with a call-up. Andy Pages getting called up last May was the kickstart that team needed because they were kind of around 500 to start the season last year, and that sent them off in a good direction. So sometimes a call-up could do it. They just called up Alex Freeland. I don't know if that can jumpstart him. Sometimes a guy getting healthy or a guy getting hurt in either direction can be the kickstart you need. Sometimes it's a trade. So we'll see what that is, but maybe in this case, it's a combination of all of them. It's calling up Freeland. It's maybe making some trades here at the deadline on Thursday. It's getting a guy like Blake Snell back from the IL, maybe getting Muncy back here in a few weeks to help kickstart this team. And also seeing that the Padres are in your rear view as a way to kind of give you that kick in the butt that this team needs to get focused and lock in and start to turn it on down the stretch.
Shout out to Alex Freeland since you just brought him up. He got his first MLB hit today. He got a couple good swings off the bat. He looked really good. So hopefully he can be a contributor for the Dodgers. I kind of expect him to maybe be sent down when Muncy returns. But in the meantime, I do love what I'm seeing from Freeland. So happy for the guy.
I would agree with you, unless that ankle injury for Tommy Edman. Obviously, he homered on Tuesday, so he seems to be okay. But if that gets a little more serious and he needs to go on the IL, that could give a little bit of a more of a runway for Freeland. But it's good to see him come up. It's good to see these top prospects. It's good to see the guys in the locker room who are struggling right now see these young guys come up who are hungry, who are exciting, who give it that little jolt of energy that this team needs. And obviously they finally win a series here against the Reds. So it could be a good sign. And I agree with you. I don't think we'll see Freeland up in the big leagues for long, but you never know with this team and guys dropping like flies.
So you talked some bullpen targets. The dynamics for this week have really shifted. I actually never really felt like the Dodgers were going to be in on Johan Duran. I felt like the price was just too expensive. And with the Phillies trading Mick Abel earlier today, that kind of confirms my thoughts. To me, the comp would be like the Dodgers having to move maybe Emmett Sheehan or Ferris, Jackson Ferris, one of those two arms.
You nailed it. That's the price tag for any high leverage, all-star level reliever that's under team control. I'm talking guys like Mason Miller, Emmanuel Clase would have been in that category had he not just been put on leave for this investigation. That's a guy that the Dodgers had been in conversations with about. They had talked to the dynamics of what a deal might look like, what a deal with Stephen Kwan maybe added into that package might look like. We can ostensibly say off the table now, unless they want to go get a Bieber, a Shane Bieber, and a Kwan deal, but I don't think they need another starting pitcher. So I don't see that coming to fruition. As you mentioned, Mason Miller and Duran, those price tags were at least two young pitching prospects. That would be a Sheehan and a Jackson Ferris. It would be a Sheehan and a Robleski, or Robleski and Ferris, some sort of combination of that. And look, we just saw what the cost was for the Phillies for Duran. They're number 4 and number 6 prospects. That's 2 top 10 prospects. And I know Phillies fans are in my DMs right now ecstatic, saying, let's go. And they just added David Robertson, obviously. a free agent signing. We know the Dodgers are going to take a look at Joe Kelly here pretty soon. That's a guy that has vowed he would only return to the Dodgers. So the Dodgers are unturning every stone possible, looking under every rock and in every cave to try to find relief help and bullpen help right now. But I think the help can come from within, and I don't think 2 top 10 prospects for a reliever is what the Dodgers need right now, especially when you see how much pitching depth is necessary. Before the season began, the Dodgers thought they had a plethora of starting pitching. They had too much depth. We were talking, who was not going to be able to start or who would have to go into bullpen. And as soon as the season begins, Blake Snell goes down, Tyler Glasnow goes down, guys start dropping like flies, and you realize pitching depth is something that you can never have enough of. And so to give away these young starters under control for years and affordable for a reliever, which is always a gamble here, guys, to me is just too steep of a price to pay. And, Dombrowski is known for paying that price. The Phillies are going for it. That's great. Well, the Phillies are not the Dodgers. They're not the Yankees. They're not these teams that are in big markets that can kind of bolster themselves in the off season the way, these big market teams can. And so to that point, we can go back to this moment last year, right, where the Dodgers were in on Tanner Scott last year, an all-star closer with the Marlins. He ends up going to San Diego. Jason Adam ends up going to San Diego. It cost them a lot of prospects for them to grab these guys, bolster that bullpen, obviously to go with Suarez, who was their closer. We thought they had an unbelievable bullpen. I thought they were a better team than the Dodgers all around, simply because they put the ball in play. They had guys who could slug. They had guys who could hit for contact, like Luis Arias, like Jurickson Profar last year. They had a lights-out bullpen. They had starting pitching with Dylan Cease, and we saw just how that played out in the playoffs. That 5-game series in the NLDS with the Dodgers down 2-1, backs against the wall, no Freddie Freeman, having to throw a bullpen game, but managing to find a way to beat that team. And every single player in the locker room told me, after the World Series, that was the toughest team they played. That was their own World Series to get past that team. So if you're the Padres on that side, you send all these prospects out for Tanner Scott, for Jason Adam, and you end up losing in the NLDS to 5 to the Dodgers. So even if the Dodgers were to go out and get a Duran, a Mason Miller, add more bullpen help, add these high leverage arms, and send these top prospects out in return, there's no guarantee that's going to give you a World Series or even get you out of the first round. And so I would ask fans who are really wanting them to go all in and get these high leverage relievers to look at what the Padres did last year and look at what we now know Tanner Scott is, because we made him the highest paid reliever in MLB in the offseason. We added another former closer in Kirby Yates in the offseason. They made these moves to go all in the offseason. They signed Blake Snell. They went out and got Roki Sasaki, who could have signed with 15, 16 teams in MLB. So they did go all in the offseason. They have guys coming back to bolster the pen, to bolster the starting rotation, to bolster their lineup like Max Muncy soon. So they have kind of trades by just getting guys healthy happening. And I would ask you, if you were the Dodgers last season, would you have traded an Emmett Sheehan and a Jackson Ferris or a Robleski or a Ben Kasparius or a Jack Dreyer? Would you have traded these guys knowing what they are now, having seen them on the big league roster, for Tanner Scott last year? Would you have made that move knowing what happened with the Padres and knowing what we know Tanner Scott is now? I don't think you'd do that. And so this is a very long. Go ahead. Yeah, so this is a very long-winded answer to say maybe you don't pay that steep price, because we're not the Padres. The Padres, if they can sniff the postseason and have a chance to win a World Series, they need to put all their chips in the middle and go for a run like this, because they're not going to have the capital of the Dodgers to have a $500 million payroll in the offseason, to lure big names in the free agent market with a big market, with a nice destination like Los Angeles, the way the Yankees can, the way the Red Sox can. So, the Dodgers make their moves in the offseason, and now they just need to bolster this pen, who's had a very high usage throughout the season right now, who could take a break and need some relief. Some of that can come from the guys they have in-house. We're looking at you, Dustin May, Emmett Sheehan coming out of the pen to to piggyback a little bit off of Ohtani after Banda got out of that jam, is a great example of you can put some of these arms in the pen and give them some runway and bolster your bullpen that way. Michael Kopech at some point is coming back. Brusdar Graterol is coming back. Blake Trinan just came back. You have guys internally that are going to get healthy that could help make bolster that pen. And so rather than look at some of the guys that we were talking about with team control that's going to cost you more prospects, as far as guys still out there, I don't think now that Clase's out, Cade Smith's going to be available. That was one name I know they had talked about. David Bednar is a guy who's still available. He's got more than 1 year of team control. He's a former all-star closer. That's a guy that we could see the Dodgers, maybe if they want to go for the high end to bolster the pen, could be moved at the deadline. Dennis Santana, an old friend, I think would be available. I don't know if they want that kind of reunion. So those are guys that are under team control that might cost them a little more that they could still grab. And then you look at some other familiar faces. I know the Rangers are still in the hunt, but would they do a reunion with Chris Martin? I know that cost them dearly the first time in Zach McKinstry, but maybe that's a move that they want to bring a reunion in. And the Nationals made some trades today, which we should get into, Kevin. What the heck are the Angels doing? I don't even know at this point. It seems like right now they're buyers. That could change tomorrow. But there's another potential reunion with Kenley Jansen, who's a free agent at the end of the year. But it looks like the Angels, 3 games below 500, I don't know, in the middle of the pack in the wild card, are trying to maybe go for it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing or why. Kyle Finnegan is a name that I keep hearing they've asked about. I brought that up because the Nationals sent some guys to the Angels today, and that's a reliever who's very good in my opinion. Not this season. He has a 4.62 ERA. But so did Michael Kopech, had a high ERA last year. When you're on a losing team and you're not playing for the postseason, your stats aren't that good. And if you go to a team contending for a championship, suddenly it reinvigorates you and you can show better. And then Rafael Iglesias, the Braves seem to be buying and selling right now. That's a former all-star closer that could be had for the right price. He's a rental. Ryan Helsley was a guy I know the Dodgers were in on.
Yeah, that's the one that I thought.
I thought too, and the Mets grabbed him up today. But Phil Maton could be a supporting guy that they get instead if they miss out on Ryan Helsley. I believe he's still available. And lastly, they're going to Tampa Bay, and there's a guy in Tampa Bay named Pete Fairbanks, who's a free agent at the end of this year, but has a team option. So if he came over and pitched very well out of the pen and bolstered at the deadline, you could take that option as the Dodgers and you would have him again for the following season. I don't think that would cost you a lot, and it looks like the Rays are probably selling. So those are some names I've been hearing, as well as the names you guys have been hearing, like Harrison Bader, potentially an outfield help. Willie Castro, a guy in the Twins, a utility guy. It's another guy I've been hearing about who's on the Twins with Bader that the Dodgers are interested in. But when it was around Duran, those price tags were high. Griffin Jax is a guy I know the Phillies wanted, so they pivoted to Duran. I don't know if the Twins now sell Jax, trade Jax with Duran going, but if they want to sell and get someone too, Griffin Jax is another guy who the Dodgers saw up close and personal at Dodger Stadium last week. That's another guy that could be had. So these are some names I'm hearing, and I think at least one of those names I just mentioned will be on the Dodgers this time tomorrow.
So, yeah, a lot to get into, but yeah. So before he got popped for betting, I thought Clase was their guy, and yeah, I had read conflicting reports, but my intuition is the Dodgers were definitely in on him, and then that obviously shifted when he got put on paid leave. Naturally, I thought then maybe they would pivot to Ryan Helsley. I was actually surprised that the Mets pulled that off, but credit to the Mets for being aggressive. So now I'm kind of in a pickle here because I don't really know who would make sense for the Dodgers. Pete Fairbanks is kind of the name I'm gravitating towards right now. I just feel like he's another Blake Trinan like, where you can pitch him in the 9th, you can pitch him in the 6th. He's just a Swiss Army knife, versatile reliever. So I'm kind of thinking it might be him.
Yeah, another guy I liked who was in that category before the Royals just gave him an extension was Seth Lugo.
Yeah.
That's a guy who the Dodgers were having trade talks about a couple of years ago at the deadline with the Mets, who they really wanted to bring in. This is when he was a high leverage reliever. Obviously, they don't end up getting that trade. He stays with the Mets. He ends up being a free agent, signs on as a starter, and has become a great starting pitcher now for the Royals. But that's a guy the Dodgers love as a Swiss Army knife. You talked about, like Pete Fairbanks, where he can start in a spot start if you need him. He could go to the pen. He's done it before. He's been a high leverage reliever. So that's a guy that just naturally could come out of the pen if they wanted or start. Obviously, he signs an extension. He's not going anywhere now. But that was a name I was hearing they had been asking about. A lot of teams actually asking about, because he's just got that Swiss Army knife value to him, the way Ross Stripling used to have back in the day and stuff. And so Pete Fairbanks is that guy if they want to go that route, as I mentioned. If they just want to kind of add a low leverage reliever, maybe Kyle Finnegan is that guy, as we mentioned. If they want to try a little bit higher and not spend as much, maybe that's Iglesias or Phil Maton, as I just mentioned. And if you want to go shopping on the top shelf, right, at the luxury high level, then you're going to try to go out there and make a deal for Mason Miller, or make a deal for like David Bednar. Those are probably 1 and 2 as far as top of the list, but it's going to cost them. It just depends on if they want to spend. And in all my conversations, Kevin, with Andrew Friedman and Brandon Gomes, for that matter, they're kind of clones of each other, if I'm being honest, is they like to do their shopping in the offseason. Yep. The best way I can describe this for your listeners and for Dodgers fans out there is, to give you an analogy that makes sense to me. I just bought a house out in Thousand Oaks last fall, and I'm remodeling it. I'm going to sell it. And so I got these kind of homes right now and looking at the real estate market as an analogy. But imagine you live in a housing community, gated community, with only 30 homes, and they're all, $1 million homes, very nice homes, mansions. And 20 of those homes in this homeowners gated community, they got some little small minor things with them. Maybe there's a leaky roof in one. Maybe another one has termites. Maybe another one's got some rodents in it. Maybe another one needs a new driveway. They just got small little problems that need to be fixed. And instead, these teams want to go out and just buy a new home, right?
Yep.
And move, because that's the way they want to deal with these problems. But unfortunately, there's only like 8 to 10 people in this community selling their homes right now, but 20 homeowners want to buy. And so if there's 20 people in the market to buy a new home and only 8 or 10 on sale, then obviously those homes go up in price, and the homeowners can have a bidding war to do that. And it's going to cost those people a lot more to do that than if all these homes were repaired and there's not as many people buying on the market. And that's exactly the analogy I would use right now for the Dodgers. They are in a bidding war, as you're seeing, with teams like the Phillies, who just got Duran, with teams like the Mets, who just got Helsley, with the Angels, who bolstered their bullpen, with the Reds, who I think just added a reliever while we were on this podcast. Every team that's out there, and since they expanded the playoffs, it's suddenly not 10 or 12 teams that are buyers. It's now 20 plus teams that are buyers right now, all with a shot of making the playoffs. And the Dodgers don't like to be had, especially when you've made deals in the past, which are being talked about right now, like Yordan Alvarez for Josh Fields, Watson for the cruise missile. There's a lot of deals that the Dodgers have done that have probably come back to bite them. You could maybe talk about McKinstry. You could maybe talk Michael Busch as some of these trade deals. And that point overall is, when you do it for a reliever, there's no guarantee this reliever is going to show up and be the next Eric Gagne, you know what I mean? Or be the next all-star closer reliever for the Dodgers. Tanner Scott was that guy. He was the best free agent reliever on the market. The Dodgers made him the highest paid free agent reliever in baseball, and he has the most blown saves right now of any closer in baseball, and he's been struggling this season. So it's a big risk to mortgage some of the future and trade top prospects for a reliever. And at this time of year, especially when the price tag is kind of astronomical, as you just mentioned, the way it is for Mason Miller, the way it would have been for Clase, the way it was for Duran, you pivot to some of those guys we just talked about that won't cost you as much.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it sounds like the bullpen, it's really up in the air. What about bats? Because I feel like the Dodgers definitely need to add some type of outfield depth. I know that now they're kind of leaning maybe in the direction of keeping Conforto. I don't know if I necessarily buy that stock. I would still like to see them shift gears and go with a different corner outfielder. But let's hear your thoughts, Michael, kind of where the Dodgers are on the offensive side. I know with Hae-Sung Kim going on the IL, that certainly maybe adds a need for a utility guy. So I'll let you speak.
Yeah, so I heard they were leaning more towards a utility guy than maybe they were an outfielder solely. There had been talks earlier about a guy like Luis Robert Jr. I think and that's a guy the Dodgers not only were interested in last trade deadline, they were interested in the offseason. They probably were interested a little bit earlier this season, but he's played so poorly on that terrible White Sox team that I think he has probably played himself out of a trade, if I'm being honest with you right now. So I don't think he's on the target. Obviously, fans wanted Jarren Duran. They were just in Boston. They were like, just send Dustin May to the Red Sox locker room and give us Jarren Duran. Well, Jarren Duran was the MVP of the All-Star game last season. He's got all the tools in his belt. He's got power. He's got speed. He can hit for contact. We saw a little bit of it in that series. He'd be a great fit, but I don't think the Red Sox are going to trade him. I don't think a lot of guys outside of the obvious names we talked about are going to move at this deadline. And so I don't think he's a guy that you're going to see traded. And I don't think the Dodgers are interested in purely an outfielder by themselves. I think you kind of nailed it with Hae-Sung Kim going down, but also just the way they've operated throughout the Andrew Friedman era. Give us a guy that can play multiple positions. He can play the outfield and the infield. Give us a guy like Kike Hernandez, who they traded for a couple years ago from the Red Sox. Give us guys like that who can plug a lot of holes for them. And then that's a guy that they tend to find more value in. I know Adolis Garcia was a guy that the Dodgers wanted if they were solely looking for outfielder. He was a name linked to them even last year. But I think the Rangers are going for it. They're not too far out. So I don't think that's a guy that's for sure. So then we pivot to what I was talking about with Willie Castro. That's a utility guy. He can play multiple positions. The Twins appear to be sellers right now, obviously giving rid of Duran. Harrison Bader is another name. He can probably play all three outfield positions if we're being honest. He can definitely play center and left, so that gives them some flexibility there. That's a name that they were looking at. I don't know. I feel like Brian Reynolds will be available, but I feel like that's just Conforto part 2, so I don't see them making a move like that. And outside of that, there's really not a lot of guys that are going to be available. Especially utility guys that we're talking about, guys like that. Ramon Urias, I think, was a guy with the Orioles. He can play third base.
He just got traded
people
to
have
the
been calling
Astros.
about him. Okay, so there you go. So that means they're probably not going to get Correa. But Isaiah Kinner-Falefa on the Pirates, that's another utility guy, but he's mostly infield. But that's a guy if you want to go infielder. But I think they want a guy who can play infield and outfield. So those were the names. And I know it was already out there, but when they were talking about Clase, it was a package that would be Clase and Kwan. I think the Guardians, want to move Kwan. That's a guy that I think the Dodgers might be interested in. I just don't think it happens because I think they want someone who has more of a utility role like a Castro or a Bader. So those would be the two names that I would look at if they add a position player for the right price. And obviously it would probably mean sending Conforto out in that case. It would be for one of those two guys. But I'm hearing the same thing you're hearing, Kevin, which is they think Michael Conforto is starting to turn around. He's hitting the ball hard. He's been kind of turning around the last 6 weeks or so. Sometimes we don't see the results because he hits it right too, guys. But they feel like, at some point, this is the Dave Roberts phrase he likes to use, at some point they're going to be what's on the back of the baseball card, and they think it's some point here in the last couple months of the season, Michael Conforto can be what's on the back of his baseball card. And so they're not necessarily going to move him just because they have to. It would have to be for a guy that they think would be a step above and can play multiple positions.
One of our friends of the show, Pat Ragazzo, reported a couple of days ago that Yankees were interested in Dustin May. Do you think Dustin May is going to survive this deadline?
That's a great question. Yes, there's a lot of teams who would be interested in Dustin May. And we do know the Dodgers have a history of moving guys who are going to be free agents at the end of the season who they don't believe are going to re-sign with them at the deadline or earlier. We saw it last year with James Paxton. We've seen it in years prior. Look, the Padres have been in talks with the Yankees about Dylan Cease going to New York and other teams. That sounds crazy because you could argue he's their best pitcher, and they're in a wild card position and 3 games behind the Dodgers. Why would you do that? Well, he's a free agent, and likely they're not going to be able to afford to re-sign him. So if you can get a lot for him and maybe get a pitcher back that can start for you, they do that. But so far, they haven't seen a deal that they can like that's up to that price tag as well. So, look, it really depends on what the Dodgers can add, because I think they see, as we all see, as Dustin May as someone who can, if an injury is possible, be a starting pitcher for them, as he has been. You could argue he's been the most consistent starting pitcher for the Dodgers this season outside of Yamamoto. But he is a free agent at the end of the year. I think this trade talk over the last week has bothered Dustin May a little bit. I think he's not used to hearing it, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't think he's a guy the Dodgers will re-sign. So I think he goes elsewhere. So I think if you can get something in return, you do that. And the Dodgers are notorious for doing that. But at the same time, if the price tag is too high for some of these relievers, as guys start to come off, Gregory Soto was another guy the Dodgers have made calls about. Obviously, he goes elsewhere too. So there's a lot of guys they're in on. They've been having conversations about, and it just seems like these other teams who are a little more desperate than the Dodgers, they're paying the asking price, these high asking prices. So I think it depends on if they have deals in place tomorrow to go down. And if they do get the relievers they need, that we hope, then I think, yeah, Dustin May becomes expendable. But if not, then Dustin May is one of those guys like Emmett Sheehan, like Justin Wrobleski, that can, like Ben Kasparius, that can go to the bullpen, and suddenly you've bolstered your bullpen by moving a starting pitcher with nasty stuff who, instead of needs to go 4 or 5 innings, can just pitch 1 inning or 1+. And that's something I think Dustin May can do, because his biggest knack is not that the stuff is not nasty. It's not that he doesn't have it. I mean, he had a no-hitter against the White Sox right into like the 5th or 6th inning. It's that he hasn't been able to do it for 6 innings straight or 7 innings straight. But if you can limit it down to just 1 inning and come out and just give it your all in that case, he might be a more valuable option for the Dodgers, moving him to the pen for the last 2 months of the season than trading him for a prospect that you get in return for a rental, which is not going to be a top prospect.
My hot take is that the Dodgers trade Dustin May tomorrow for Trent Grisham. I don't have any intel. That's just a gut feeling. An outfielder who can play center and would help with the alignment. Pages could play right. Teoscar hopefully left. And we'll see.
Trent Grisham has just been absolutely awful this year against, I think, left-handed pitching. I don't know if that's a guy the Dodgers would want to bring in for that case.
The jock type.
Correct. Because they have a lot of guys that are awful against left-handed pitching. So you'd be bringing him in as a platoon player instead. And maybe. I definitely think, look, we know they're working the phones. We know they have outlines for deals in place. I know the names that have been talked about for the Mason Miller and Duran prior to him getting moved to the Phillies. And it's a price tag they're just not willing to pay. And as we know with Andrew Freeland in that front office, Kevin, there's plan A, B, and C, which is all the fans that we want, which were the big names we just talked about. And then there's plans D, E, F, G, H, all the way down. And they know they can pull off those lower moves at any moment. And they can even do it 5 minutes before the deadline, like when they got Jack Flaherty last year. And so, to your point, if they think, okay, we're going to end up pulling the trigger and we're going to get a Pete Fairbanks type, right? And that's a done deal and we can make it any time. We're going to still try to see if that price tag for Mason Miller comes down or David Bednar comes down before we make that move on Thursday before the deadline. And if they're just not budging and they're not willing to go lower, then we'll pivot and we'll do a Fairbanks. And if they can get that deal done, then yes, Dustin May, I think, will be out. If that doesn't happen and you only end up getting maybe one high leverage reliever guy, I think you don't make that trade because you got to move Dustin to the bullpen at some point.
Yeah, fair enough. Appreciate you joining us, Michael. Is there anything else you want to talk about, whether it's deadline, baseball, or a random thing that you're just like, I really want to talk about this?
Yeah, let's talk one last thing that I want to talk about, and that is what we've learned about the Dodgers in July is just how valuable Max Muncy is to this lineup. I don't think it's being talked about enough. Every now and then you'll hear someone talk about it. As soon as he went down and they started struggling, I have been shouting from the mountaintops that it's because Max Muncy is out of the lineup. And look, I know he missed a lot of time last year and they were still able to win without him. I'm not saying he's the most valuable player on the team, but what I'm saying is that when you take a guy out of the lineup who was so hot for like a month leading into his injury, it shows how much he was carrying that team offensively. It shows how much his bat in the 6 or 7 hole of the lineup can just bolster kind of everyone else around him, because you can't pitch around anybody if you're an opposing pitcher. And so the fact that from what looked like could have been a season-ending injury, obviously that's the moment before Kershaw gets his 3,000th K. The fact that he's now going to come back ahead of that 6-week mark, knock on wood, I think is going to be an even bigger bolster to this Dodgers team than going out and getting a Mason Miller or a Duran or a Clase. I think that'll bolster this lineup. I think Freddie Freeman is starting to turn it around. I think Mookie can start to turn it around here soon. So I think they're going to kind of get through these doldrums they've had and come back. And when Muncy comes back, it's really going to shore it up. And if he can hit the way he was hitting before he got hurt, then this offense is the best in baseball. And I really feel strongly about that. And if Blake Snell can come back and be second half Blake Snell we've seen the last few years, it fixes your starting pitching rotation, because Glasnow's back. You have Ohtani. You have Yamamoto. You have arguably the best rotation in baseball. You still have Roki. You have a 6-man rotation starting Saturday when Blake comes back. And then you have Roki Sasaki ready to come back probably here in late August. And you have all these other guys that have helped you out for the first few months of the season that we just talked about that can go into the bullpen. And so I would say, fans, relax, be patient. We have the talent on this roster. They just need to perform the way they have throughout most of their careers. And if they do that, then this is a team that is still the front runner in all of baseball, and they don't need to panic and sell 2 top pitching prospects or these guys who are in the farm system who are going to provide depth for us in the years to come, just to go get a reliever right now when we have it, I think, on this roster as it is.
I want everyone to make sure you give Michael a follow. You can follow him on X at Michael J. Duarte, and you can read his coverage of Dodgers, Lakers, or Rams for NBC Sports LA. Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. I think you dropped a lot of good knowledge and insight tonight, so we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. And next time I want to do this with Jake. I've never been on a podcast with you, Kevin, with Jake. I would love to do it with Jake too.
All right.
But I know you got to run to another one, so I'll let you run. Have a good show, and thank you again for having me on.
We're gonna get Jake on. I told him he should come on tonight, but he's a busy man.
He's definitely very busy, but I've never been on with him, and we follow each other. We're fans, so I want to definitely do a show with him one time.
I'll text his ass and I'll be like, "Look, man, Michael wants to do a show with you, and we'll get you on like in a few weeks or something."
Tell him I love it.
All right,
and cool. I want to talk about his dad's guest spot on The Bear. So I'm a big Bear
let's do
guy.
it.